The warning lights inside David Ross's cargo hauler flickered red and yellow like an angry Christmas tree. His ship groaned and shuddered as he fought with the controls, trying to keep her steady enough to reach the nearest port. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he watched the power readings drop lower and lower. "Come on, girl," he muttered, patting the console like it was an old horse. "Just a little further." The ship lurched hard to the left, throwing David against his pilot seat. Through the viewport, he could see Harmony Point growing larger. The massive trading station looked like a silver wheel spinning slowly against the black of space. Ships of all sizes moved around it like busy insects. His radio crackled to life. "Unknown vessel, this is Harmony Point Control. You appear to be in distress. State your emergency." "This is cargo hauler Blue Wanderer," David said into his headset. "I've got power failures across multiple systems. Requesting emergency docking." "Acknowledged, Blue Wanderer. Proceed to docking bay 7. Emergency cruiser standing by." David managed to guide his dying ship into the docking bay. The artificial gravity grabbed the vessel and pulled it down onto the landing platform with a heavy thud. Steam hissed from the engines as they finally gave up completely. Within minutes, alien technicians swarmed over his ship. David climbed down from the cockpit and watched them work. Most of them were tall and thin with blue-gray skin and large dark eyes. These were Alterians, one of the founding races of the Galactic Federation. They moved with practiced efficiency, running glowing scanners over every surface of his ship. An Alterian in official robes approached him. The alien's movements were smooth and graceful like a dancer. "I am Counselor Thiss, administrator of this station." "I understand you have technical difficulties." "That's putting it nicely," David said, wiping grease from his hands with an old rag. "She just died on me out there. Been running fine for months, then everything started failing at once." Thiss nodded slowly. "Our repair teams are among the best in the sector. They will assess your vessel and provide you with options." David watched the technicians work for another hour. They used devices he didn't recognize, tools that hummed and glowed and projected complex holographic displays. Everything they did looked impossibly advanced compared to his simple toolkit. Finally, the lead technician approached Thiss. They spoke in the Alterian language, a series of musical tones that sounded almost like singing. David caught a few words he recognized, but not enough to understand. Thiss turned back to him with what might have been sympathy. "I am afraid the news is not good. Chief Technician Valen reports that your vessel suffers from multiple critical failures. The power distribution network has collapsed. The engine control systems are corrupted. Most seriously, there appears to be some kind of feedback loop in your power core that our instruments cannot identify. Can you fix it?" David asked. "The cost would exceed the value of your ship by a considerable margin," Thiss said gently. "Our recommendation is salvage. We can offer you passage to any human world, and fair compensation for the recyclable materials." David felt his heart sink. Blue Wanderer wasn't much to look at, but she was his home and his livelihood. He'd spent 5 years paying her off, and she was finally his completely. "Let me take a look at her first." Chief Technician Valen overheard and spoke up in accented standard. "No disrespect intended, but our diagnostic equipment is far superior to anything available on human worlds. If we cannot identify the problem, it is unlikely that primitive tools will succeed." "Primitive?" David raised an eyebrow. Valen's skin flushed slightly darker. Perhaps that was poorly phrased. "Human technology is simply less advanced. Your species has only been spacefaring for a few centuries. We have had millennia to perfect our techniques." David looked around the docking bay. Everything was clean and sterile and perfect. The tools looked like works of art. The technicians moved like they were performing a ballet. It was all very impressive, but something bothered him about it. "Mind if I take a look anyway?" he asked. "Won't cost you anything, and I know this ship better than anyone." Thiss and Valen exchanged glances. "Of course," Thiss said, "though I fear you will only confirm what we have already discovered." David climbed back into his ship and made his way to the engine room. It was cramped and hot, with pipes and cables running everywhere. Nothing like the clean, organized engineering spaces he'd seen on Federation ships. He pulled out his basic toolkit, wrenches, screwdrivers, a simple multimeter, and a flashlight. The Alterian technicians gathered around to watch. Some of them seemed genuinely curious, others looked amused. David ignored them and got to work. He started by listening. Every ship had its own sounds, and he knew Blue Wanderer's voice as well as his own. The power plant was running rough with a strange harmonic that shouldn't be there. The distribution network was cycling oddly, like it was trying to route around something. "What are you doing?" one of the younger technicians asked. "Listening," David said, pressing his ear against a conduit. "You can tell a lot about what's wrong just by listening." The technicians looked at each other. Their diagnostic equipment could analyze thousands of parameters simultaneously, producing detailed reports and three-dimensional models. The idea of diagnosing problems by sound seemed absurd to them. David crawled deeper into the engine room, following the strange harmonic. His flashlight beam caught something unusual, a section of the power core housing that didn't match the rest. The metal was different, older, with strange patterns etched into its surface. "That's odd," he muttered, running his fingers over the markings. This wasn't in the original blueprints. He pulled out his multimeter and tested the power flow through that section. The readings made no sense. According to his instruments, more energy was coming out than going in, which was impossible. "Hey," he called to the Alterians watching him. "Do you know what this is?" Chief Technician Valen squeezed into the cramped space and examined the component with his scanner. The device beeped and flashed, then displayed a holographic readout that made Valen's eyes widen. "This appears to be precursor technology," he said quietly. "Very old. Perhaps 20,000 years or more." "Precursor?" David asked. "An ancient race that vanished long ago." This explained from the entrance to the engine room. They left behind various artifacts throughout the galaxy. Most are inactive and harmless. "Well, this one isn't inactive," David said, watching his multimeter readings fluctuate wildly. "And I don't think it's harmless either. I think it's what's killing my ship." 2 days passed while David studied the mysterious artifact buried in his ship's power core. The Alterian technicians had tried every advanced scanner they possessed, but the ancient device remained a puzzle. Their instruments could detect its presence and measure its energy output, but they couldn't understand how it worked or why it was causing problems. David took a different approach. Instead of relying on complex equipment, he used his eyes, his hands, and his experience. He traced every cable connected to the artifact, mapped every power junction, and measured voltage at dozens of connection points using his simple multimeter. "This is fascinating to observe," said Zephyr, a young Alterian engineer who had taken to watching David work. Unlike the older technicians, she seemed genuinely interested in his methods rather than dismissive. "You use such basic tools, yet you gather information our scanners miss." "Sometimes basic is better," David said, lying on his back underneath a power coupling. "Your fancy equipment tells you what something is supposed to do. My tools tell me what it's actually doing." The artifact was about the size of a briefcase made from some kind of dark metal that felt warm to the touch. Strange symbols covered its surface, flowing in patterns that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. 3 thick cables connected it to the ship's main power bus, but David couldn't figure out how they'd been attached. The connections looked like they'd grown there naturally. "According to our historical records," Zephyr said, "the precursors were masters of energy manipulation. They could do things with power systems that we still don't understand." "Yeah, well, they're doing something to mine that I don't like," David muttered, checking another connection. "The power flow through this thing makes no sense. It's like it's trying to store infinite energy in a finite space." The readings on his multimeter jumped erratically as he probed different points on the artifact. Sometimes the voltage was higher than it should be, sometimes lower, sometimes it seemed to reverse direction entirely. His ship's computer couldn't make sense of it either, which was why all the automated systems had started failing. Chief Technician Valen appeared in the engine room doorway. "Any progress?" he asked, though his tone suggested he expected disappointment. "Maybe," David said. "I think this thing is some kind of power amplifier, but it's not working right. Look at these readings." He showed Valen his multimeter display. The Alterian frowned and pulled out his own scanner, running it over the same connection points. His device showed completely different results. "Impossible," Valen said. "My scanner indicates stable power flow within normal parameters." "That's the problem," David explained. "Your scanner is seeing what the artifact wants it to see. This thing is smart. It's actively fooling your instruments." David had noticed the pattern over hours of testing. Whenever he brought the multimeter close to certain parts of the artifact, the readings would stabilize for a few seconds, as if the device was trying to hide its true behavior. But his simple analog meter was too basic to be fooled completely. "You're suggesting the artifact has some form of intelligence?" Zephyr asked. I'm saying it's trying to protect itself, David replied. Every time your people scan it, it shows them normal readings so they'll leave it alone. But it can't fool basic instruments that just measure voltage directly. The next challenge was figuring out how to shut it down safely. David spent hours studying the connections, trying to understand how power flowed through the system. The Alterians offered to help, but their diagnostic equipment was useless against a device that could lie to sensors. Instead, David relied on observation and intuition. He watched how the ship's lights dimmed and brightened as the artifact cycled through its mysterious processes. He listened to the subtle changes in the engine's hum. He even tasted the air, noticing how it became slightly metallic when the device was most active. "This is remarkable," Zephyr said, recording everything with a small device. "You're treating the ship like a living organism instead of a machine." "In a way, it is alive," David said. "Every ship has its own personality. You have to get to know it, understand how it thinks and feels. Your people build perfect machines that do exactly what they're designed to do. But humans build things that adapt and grow and surprise you." The artifact seemed to respond to his touch. When David placed his hands directly on its surface, the erratic power fluctuations would smooth out slightly. The metal grew warmer under his palms, and the strange symbols seemed to glow faintly. "It's like it recognizes me," he said wonderingly, "like it knows I'm trying to help." After 6 hours of careful work, David finally found what he was looking for. Hidden beneath one of the main power couplings was a small crystal about the size of his thumb. It pulsed with soft blue light, and his multimeter readings went crazy whenever he brought the probes near it. "I think this is the problem," he announced. "This crystal is cracked. See these hairline fractures? They're letting energy leak out in ways the system wasn't designed to handle." Valen squeezed into the tight space and examined the crystal with his scanner. This time, even the advanced Alterian device detected the damage. "You are correct," he said, sounding surprised. "The crystal matrix has suffered structural failure. But how did you know where to look?" "I followed the heat," David said simply. "Damaged components get hot when they work too hard. Your scanners look for what should be there. I look for what shouldn't be." The question now was how to fix it. The Alterians had no replacement crystals, and their databases contained no information about precursor technology repair techniques. Even if they could fabricate a new crystal, they had no idea what specifications it should meet. David studied the damaged component carefully. The fractures followed natural stress lines in the crystal structure, suggesting they'd developed over thousands of years. The crystal was still functional, just not operating at full efficiency. "Maybe we don't need to replace it," he said thoughtfully. "Maybe we just need to help it work better with what it's got." He pulled out a small tube of conductive paste from his toolkit. It was designed for sealing minor gaps in electrical connections, nothing fancy or high-tech. Working carefully with a tiny brush, he applied thin lines of the paste along the crystal's fractures. The effect was immediate. The wild energy fluctuations smoothed out and the artifact's output stabilized. His ship's computers came back online one by one as the power distribution system returned to normal. "Incredible," Zephyr breathed. "You repaired 20,000-year-old alien technology with industrial adhesive." "Sometimes the simple solution is the right solution," David said, wiping paste from his fingers. The crystal wasn't broken, just stressed. It needed a little help to do its job properly. The artifact hummed contentedly now, its symbols glowing with steady light. David's ship was running better than it had in months. But as he packed up his tools, something unexpected happened. The artifact's surface began to change, new symbols appearing and old ones shifting position. "That's new," he said, watching the patterns flow across the metal surface. "It's like it's trying to tell me something." The symbols on the artifact pulsed brighter as David touched its surface. Without warning, a beam of soft blue light shot out from the device and hit the wall of the engine room. The metal bulkhead flickered and became transparent, revealing a three-dimensional star map that filled the entire space. "What did you do?" Zephyr gasped, backing away from the holographic display. "Nothing," David said, equally startled. "I just touched it." The star map was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Thousands of star systems were connected by glowing lines that pulsed with different colors. Some areas blazed with brilliant light while others remained dim. In the center of it all was a familiar spiral galaxy, but the perspective was wrong somehow. Chief Technician Valen pushed into the crowded engine room. took one look at the display and immediately began scanning it with every device he carried. "This is extraordinary," he said. "The detail level is far beyond our current cartographic capabilities." David studied the map more closely. Something about it bothered him, but he couldn't figure out what. Then it hit him. "This isn't showing the galaxy as it is now," he said. "This is historical. Look at those star positions." He pointed to a cluster of bright stars in one arm of the galaxy. "That's the Corona Nebula region. But according to this map, there are dozens of inhabited systems there. We know that whole area is empty space. Perhaps the map is simply inaccurate," Valen suggested. "Ancient knowledge often contains errors." But Zephyr was examining a different section of the display. "Wait," she said. "Look at this sector here. These system designations match our current star charts perfectly, but there are additional markers we don't recognize." David moved closer to the area she was indicating. It showed the local region of space around Harmony Point, but with far more detail than any modern map. Hundreds of systems were marked with symbols he didn't understand, and travel routes connected everything in a complex web. "It's like they mapped every habitable world in the galaxy," he said wonderingly. "Even ones we haven't discovered yet." The display suddenly shifted, zooming in on one particular system near the edge of the galaxy. David recognized it immediately. Sul, the human home system. But according to this ancient map, it was marked with the same symbols as dozens of other worlds throughout the galaxy. "That's Earth," he said, pointing to the third planet from the central star. "But what are all these other markers?" Zephyr was working frantically with her recording device, trying to capture as much data as possible. "The symbols appear to be some form of classification system," she said. "Look, there are several different types and they're distributed in a clear pattern." David studied the pattern she'd identified. The same symbols that marked Earth also appeared on worlds scattered throughout the galaxy, but always in groups. It was like looking at a vast network of connected settlements. "It's a colony map," he realized suddenly. "This shows a civilization that spread across the entire galaxy. And Earth is part of it." The implications hit him like a physical blow. Humans weren't native to Earth. They were descendants of an ancient galactic civilization that had somehow been forgotten by history. "Impossible," Valen said firmly. "Human archaeological records show continuous development on Earth for millions of years. Your species evolved there naturally." But the map told a different story. As David watched, new details appeared. Lines of text in an unknown script accompanied the star positions, and small images showed what looked like technical diagrams. One image caught his attention. It looked remarkably like a human face. "The precursors," David whispered. "They weren't aliens. They were human." The artifact seemed to respond to his words, brightening and projecting additional information. New sections of the map appeared, showing not just colony worlds but also massive structures in deep space, stations larger than planets, ships that dwarfed anything in the modern galaxy, and energy constructs that spanned entire star systems. "This can't be accurate," Zephyr said, but her voice lacked conviction. "If humans had this level of technology in the past, what happened to it? How did it all disappear?" David was wondering the same thing when alarms began blaring throughout the station. The lights in the engine room shifted from white to red, and automated announcements echoed through the corridors. "Attention all personnel. This station is now under emergency lockdown protocols. All movement is restricted until further notice." Valen's communication device chimed urgently. He listened to the message and his expression grew troubled. "Federation security forces are boarding the station," he reported. "They detected what they're calling an unauthorized precursor activation and are responding with full authority." "They're here because of this?" David gestured at the still glowing holographic display. "Precursor artifacts are heavily regulated," Zephyr explained quickly. "Any activation must be reported immediately to Federation authorities. The penalties for unsanctioned research are severe." David looked around the engine room. The star map continued to display its ancient secrets, but now those secrets felt dangerous. "Can you turn it off?" he asked the artifact, but touching its surface only made the display brighter. Heavy footsteps echoed through the ship's corridors, accompanied by voices speaking in harsh, clipped tones. Federation security officers were searching every vessel in the docking bay. "We need to record this information," David said urgently. "If they confiscate the artifact, this knowledge could be lost forever." Zephyr was already working. her recording device capturing every detail it could process. "The data density is enormous," she said. "It will take hours to download everything." "We don't have hours," Valen warned. "Security teams are systematically searching every ship. They will reach us within minutes." David made a decision that would change his life forever. He pulled out his personal data pad, a simple human-made device that could store basic information. It wasn't sophisticated enough to capture the full complexity of the holographic display, but it might preserve the essential details. "Help me map the key systems," he said to Zephyr. "We need to at least save the colony locations." Working frantically, they identified and recorded the positions of dozens of worlds marked with human symbols. The data pad could only store coordinates and basic notes, but it was better than losing everything. The sound of boots on metal grew louder. David could hear officers questioning the crew of nearby ships, demanding access to their computers and cargo manifests. "They're 3 ships away," Valen warned. David touched the artifact one final time, trying to communicate his gratitude. The display flickered and began to fade, but not before one last image appeared. A star chart showing a route from Earth to the galactic core, marked with symbols that looked like instructions. The hologram vanished just as Federation security officers entered the docking bay outside Blue Wanderer. David quickly pocketed his data pad and tried to look like an ordinary engineer dealing with ordinary repairs. But he knew his ordinary life had just come to an end. Hidden in his simple data pad was proof that everything the galaxy believed about human history was wrong. The question now was what to do with that knowledge, and whether he would live long enough to share it. The Federation security officer who entered David's ship looked like he could crush steel with his bare hands. His species was called Drachmarian, and they were built like living tanks, gray skin-covered muscles that rippled with each movement, and his small black eyes missed nothing as they swept the engine room. "I am Captain Drex," he announced in a voice like grinding stone. "This vessel registered a Class 7 precursor energy signature 12 minutes ago." "Explain." David tried to look confused while his heart hammered in his chest. "Precursor what now?" "I was just fixing my engines." Captain Drex moved closer, and David could smell something like burnt metal on his breath. "Our sensors detected a massive information download from an ancient artifact. The energy pattern was unmistakable." "Look around," David said, gesturing at his simple tools scattered across the floor. "Do I look like someone who deals with ancient artifacts?" "I'm just a cargo hauler trying to get my ship running." But Drex wasn't buying it. He pulled out a scanning device that looked more like a weapon than a tool. The device hummed ominously as it swept over the repaired power core, and its readings made the captain's eyes narrow. "There," he said, pointing at the artifact David had fixed. "Precursor technology recently activated. You will surrender this device immediately." Valen stepped forward diplomatically. "Captain, this component was integrated into the ship's power system before the current owner acquired the vessel. He was merely performing routine maintenance." "Maintenance?" Drex snorted. "Our readings indicate a full system activation with complete data extraction. That requires specialized knowledge and authorization codes, neither of which this human possesses." David watched as more security officers filled the docking bay outside his ship. They were setting up scanning equipment and questioning everyone in sight. Counselor Thys stood near the bay entrance, looking troubled but helpless. "I need to inspect your data storage devices," Drex continued. "Any information extracted from precursor artifacts is classified as a Federation state secret." David's hand moved unconsciously toward the pocket containing his data pad. The simple device held star charts that could rewrite galactic history, but he had no way to protect it from Drex's scanners. That's when Zephyr surprised everyone. "Captain," she said respectfully, "as a licensed Federation engineer, I must protest this investigation. The human was working under my direct supervision. Any precursor activation was accidental and has been properly contained." Drex turned his intimidating gaze on the young Alterian. "You take responsibility for this incident?" "I do," Zephyr said firmly. "The artifact is now dormant and poses no threat. Further investigation is unnecessary." For a moment, David thought her intervention might work, but then Drex's scanner beeped again and the captain's expression grew even darker. "Impossible," he growled. "I'm detecting encrypted data transmissions from this location. Someone is attempting to copy classified information." David realized that Zephyr's recording device was still active, still trying to download data from the now dormant artifact. The young engineer's eyes widened as she understood the danger. "Run," she whispered to David. "What?" he said, not understanding. "Run!" she shouted, throwing herself at Captain Drex and triggering some kind of electronic warfare device that filled the engine room with crackling energy. David didn't need a second invitation. He grabbed his toolkit and bolted for the ship's exit, pushing past confused security officers who were temporarily blinded by Zephyr's device. Alarms were blaring everywhere now, and emergency lights bathed the docking bay in red. He made it halfway across the bay before someone tackled him from behind. David rolled with the impact and came up swinging his heavy wrench. The security officer blocking his path ducked, giving David just enough room to keep running. "Stop him!" Drex's voice boomed over the chaos. "He has classified data." David sprinted between parked ships using their bulk to block the line of sight from pursuing officers. His destination was the far side of the docking bay, where he'd noticed a human cargo vessel during his first day on the station. If he could reach it, maybe he could find help from his own species. The ship was called Midnight Runner, and she looked fast. Her engines were already warming up, glowing blue in the dim bay lighting. As David approached, the cargo ramp lowered and a woman appeared in the doorway. "This way," she called, waving him forward. David didn't question his luck. He pounded up the ramp just as energy bolts began flashing past his head. The woman slammed her hand on a control panel and the ramp snapped shut behind him. "Lynn Martinez," she said, offering her hand. "Smuggler, entrepreneur, and apparently your ride out of here." "David Ross," he gasped, trying to catch his breath. "Engineer, cargo hauler, and currently in way over my head." Lynn was already moving toward the cockpit. "Save the introductions for later. Drex's people just sealed the docking bay, but I know a few tricks they don't." The ship lurched as Lynn fired the engines. Instead of heading for the main exit, she steered toward what looked like a maintenance hatch barely large enough for their vessel. "That's not big enough," David protested. "It is if you fold the wings back," Lynn said calmly, manipulating controls David couldn't identify. The ship's profile changed, becoming narrower and longer. They squeezed through the hatch with centimeters to spare. "Neat trick," David admitted. "I've had to leave a few places in a hurry," Lynn said. "What did you do to upset Captain Drex so badly?" David pulled out his datapad and quickly explained what he'd discovered. Lynn listened while she piloted them away from Harmony Point, dodging the Federation ships that were already moving to intercept them. "Ancient human colonies scattered across the galaxy," she said when he finished. "That's either the discovery of the century or the craziest story I've ever heard. Look at the data yourself," David offered. Lynn glanced at the star charts on his simple device, and her expression grew serious. "Some of these coordinates match systems in my navigation database, systems that are supposed to be uninhabited." Their conversation was interrupted by proximity alarms. 3 Federation patrol ships were closing on them, their weapons already powering up. "Unknown vessel," came a broadcast on all frequencies. "You are harboring a fugitive in possession of stolen Federation property. Surrender immediately or face the consequences." "What now?" David asked. Lynn's hands danced over her controls, activating systems David had never seen before. "Now we find out if my ship is as fast as I think she is." The patrol ships opened fire, but Lynn was already moving. Midnight Runner twisted and dove, using a nearby asteroid field for cover. Energy bolts lit up the space around them like deadly fireworks. "They're not trying to disable us," Lynn observed grimly. "They want us destroyed." David watched the tactical display as more Federation ships joined the pursuit. "They're really serious about keeping this information secret." "Then maybe it's information that needs to get out," Lynn said. "Where's the nearest human world?" David checked his star charts. "New Geneva is about 6 days from here, but they'll never let us get that far." "Then we don't go to New Geneva," Lynn decided. "We go somewhere they won't expect." She changed course, heading toward the galactic core where space was thick with nebulae and ancient debris. It was dangerous territory that most ships avoided, but it might give them the cover they needed. As Harmony Point fell away behind them, David realized there was no going back. His simple repair job had uncovered secrets someone was willing to kill for. Now he had to stay alive long enough to figure out what to do with the most important discovery in galactic history. In the distance, more Federation ships appeared on their sensors, forming a net to trap them. The chase had only just begun. 3 days into their flight toward the galactic core, Lynn's ship was running on fumes and borrowed time. They'd managed to stay ahead of their Federation pursuers by jumping between asteroid fields and hiding in the shadows of dead planets. But their luck was running out. "Fuel's at 15%, Lynn reported from the pilot seat. "We need to find somewhere to refuel, or we'll be drifting in space waiting for Drex to collect us." David was hunched over his datapad, trying to make sense of the star charts he'd captured. The information was fragmentary, but patterns were starting to emerge. According to this data, there should be a precursor facility in the Vega Drift Nebula. "Maybe we can find fuel there." "Precursor facility?" Lynn looked skeptical. "You mean like a gas station that's been abandoned for 20,000 years? "More like a way station," David said, showing her the relevant star chart. "Look at these supply routes. The precursors built a network of support facilities throughout the galaxy. If even one of them is still functional, it's better than drifting until we starve," Lynn agreed. Plotting course for Vega Drift. The nebula was a cloud of glowing gas and cosmic dust that stretched across several light years. Ships could hide in there for months without being detected. But the radiation and gravitational anomalies made navigation extremely dangerous. As they entered the nebula's outer edge, David's datapad began acting strangely. The screen flickered and displayed symbols that weren't in any human language. Then, without warning, it projected a holographic arrow pointing deeper into the nebula. "That's new," Lynn observed. "I think it's guiding us," David said. "The precursor data is reacting to something in here." They followed the arrow through a maze of gas clouds and floating debris. The nebula was beautiful but treacherous, with electric storms that could fry their electronics and gravity wells that appeared without warning. Lynn had to use all her piloting skills to keep them on course. After 2 hours of careful navigation, they found it. The facility materialized out of the nebula like a metal mountain, its surface covered with the same flowing symbols David had seen on the artifact. It was massive, easily the size of a small moon, and it was very much alive with energy. "That's impossible," Lynn breathed. "How can something that old still be operational?" "Maybe it's been waiting," David suggested. "Waiting for the right person to find it." The facility's docking bays opened automatically as they approached, as if it recognized their ship. Lynn guided Midnight Runner into a landing chamber that sealed itself behind them and filled with breathable atmosphere. "Well," she said, shutting down the engines, "this is either the smartest thing we've ever done, or the stupidest." They explored the facility together, finding corridors that stretched for kilometers and chambers filled with equipment they couldn't identify. Everything was pristine, as if it had been built yesterday instead of 20 millennia ago. Soft lights activated as they walked, guiding them deeper into the structure. At the facility's heart, they discovered something that made David's breath catch. It was a control room with walls covered in holographic displays showing the entire galaxy. But this wasn't the galaxy as it existed today. This was the galaxy as it had been during the height of precursor civilization. "Look at all those inhabited worlds," Lynn whispered. "There must be thousands of them." David approached the central console, and it responded to his presence by activating a new display. Text appeared in perfect standard, as if the ancient system had learned their language by observing them. "Welcome, inheritor," the text read. "You have carried the legacy far from its origin. Are you prepared to learn the truth?" David looked at Lynn, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes," he said aloud. The control room filled with images and data streams that told the story of the precursor civilization. They had indeed been human, or at least the ancestors of modern humans. Their empire had spanned the galaxy, connecting thousands of worlds through advanced technology and shared knowledge. But something had gone wrong. The display showed increasing conflicts between different factions of precursors, disagreements about the direction their civilization should take. Some wanted to continue expanding and exploring. Others believed they should transcend physical existence entirely. The Ascension War, David read from the ancient records. It lasted for 3,000 years and devastated the galaxy. The war had ended not with victory but with exodus. The surviving precursors had abandoned their physical forms and retreated to higher dimensions of existence, leaving their colonies to fend for themselves. Most of the colony worlds had fallen into barbarism and forgotten their origins. Only a few, like Earth, had managed to develop new civilizations from the ground up. "So humans didn't evolve on Earth," Lynn said. We were always spacefaring. We just forgot. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. The display showed how the modern Galactic Federation had been built on lies. The founding races, Altarians, Drakmarians, and others, had discovered precursor ruins and reverse-engineered the technology. But they'd done it poorly, creating inefficient copies of systems they didn't understand. They've been using our technology for thousands of years, David realized, and they've been keeping us from reclaiming it. The records showed Federation policy specifically designed to suppress human expansion and limit access to precursor sites. They'd painted humans as a young, primitive species to justify treating them as second-class citizens. Any human who got too close to the truth was eliminated. That's why Drex wants us dead, Lynn said grimly. We're proof that their entire civilization is built on stolen technology and lies. David studied the data for hours, learning about precursor science and technology. The knowledge was staggering. Energy sources that could power entire star systems, transportation networks that could move ships instantly across the galaxy, and construction techniques that could build structures in higher dimensions. We need to get this information to other humans, he said finally. Every human colony, every human government, everyone who's been told we're inferior. How? Lynn asked. The Federation controls all the communication networks. They'll intercept any transmission we send. David smiled, remembering something from the precursor records. Not all of them. Look at this. He showed her a section of the data that described the precursor communication system. It didn't use radio waves or subspace transmissions like modern technology. Instead, it transmitted information through quantum entanglement between specially prepared crystals. The network is still active, David explained. Dormant but functional. If we can activate even one transmission node, we can send this data to every human world simultaneously. The facility's main computer offered to help them locate the nearest transmission node. It was built into an asteroid in the Sol system, hidden in the ruins of what had once been humanity's first interstellar shipyard. Earth, Lynn said. We're going home, but first they needed to prepare. David downloaded everything he could from the facility's computers, storing terabytes of precursor knowledge in Lynn's ship computers. The information included star charts, showing the locations of hundreds of hidden human colonies, technical specifications for advanced spacecraft, and most importantly, the access codes needed to activate the dormant precursor network. As they prepared to leave, David took one last look at the control room that had revealed the truth about his species. Humans weren't newcomers to the galaxy. They were its rightful inheritors, the children of a civilization that had once connected every star. Ready? Lynn asked from the doorway. Ready, David said. Let's go wake up the galaxy. The approach to Earth had never looked so dangerous. Federation warships formed a blockade around the Sol system, their weapons trained on any vessel that tried to approach humanity's homeworld. David and Lynn watched from the edge of sensor range as patrol ships swept space looking for their small cargo hauler. They've turned our own system into a prison, Lynn said bitterly. Look at those gun platforms. They've got enough firepower to sterilize the planet. David studied the tactical display on Lynn's scanner. The Federation had positioned their forces to control all the major shipping lanes and communication relays. Nothing got in or out without their permission, but the precursor data had shown him something the Federation didn't know about. There, he said, pointing at a seemingly empty region of space near the asteroid belt. The old shipyard. The transmission node is hidden in what looks like just another piece of space junk. Getting there meant threading between Federation patrol routes and avoiding the automated sensor nets. Lynn used every trick she'd learned as a smuggler, running silent with minimal life support, and using the asteroid belt's natural radiation to mask their heat signature. The derelict shipyard was enormous, a twisted mass of metal and ceramic that had been abandoned for over 50,000 years. To Federation sensors it looked like worthless debris, but David could see the hidden structure underneath. The elegant curves of precursor architecture disguised by millennia of accumulated space dust. They docked with what appeared to be a broken cargo bay, but the ancient systems recognized their presence and activated. Atmosphere flowed into the chamber, and lights began glowing along corridors that had been dark since before human civilization began. It's like the whole place has been waiting for us, Lynn observed as they made their way deeper into the facility. The transmission node was located at the shipyard's core, a crystalline chamber filled with arrays of quantum entanglement devices. Each crystal was the size of David's fist and pulsed with soft light, connected to others like it throughout the galaxy. The precursor network had been designed to survive the collapse of their civilization, waiting for their descendants to reclaim it. David connected his datapad to the central console and began the upload process. The accumulated knowledge from the precursor facility flowed into the quantum crystals, preparing for simultaneous transmission to every human world. "How long will this take?" Lynn asked, watching nervously for signs of Federation pursuit. "The system says about 30 minutes to encode everything," David replied. "Then it goes out instantaneously to every node in the network." But they weren't going to get 30 minutes. Proximity alarms began blaring as Federation ships appeared on their sensors, closing fast on the shipyard's location. "They've found us," Lynn announced grimly. 3 heavy cruisers and a dozen fighters. "We're not getting out of here!" Captain Drex's voice boomed over their communication system. "David Ross, you have caused enough damage to galactic security. Surrender the stolen data immediately, or face the consequences." David looked at the upload progress bar crawling across his screen. 27 minutes remaining. "Keep them talking," he told Lynn. "We need more time." Lynn activated their transmitter. "Captain Drex, this is Lynn Martinez. We're prepared to negotiate." "There will be no negotiations," Drex snarled. "You have 15 seconds to abandon that facility before we destroy it." The upload had only reached 8% completion. David frantically worked with the ancient controls, trying to find a way to speed up the process. The precursor systems were incredibly sophisticated, but they'd been designed for careful, methodical operation. 10 seconds, Drex announced. That's when the shipyard's defensive systems came online. Weapons that had slept for 50 millennia suddenly activated, targeting the approaching Federation ships with energy beams that could slice through their hulls like paper. The ancient facility had been designed to protect itself, and it still remembered how to fight. "What in the void?" Drex exclaimed as his ship scrambled to avoid the devastating weapons fire. "Looks like we've got friends." Lynn grinned, watching Federation ships retreat to a safer distance. The distraction bought them precious time, but David knew it wouldn't last long. The Federation would bring up heavier ships and eventually overwhelm the shipyard's defenses. They needed to get the transmission out before that happened. At 75% completion, inspiration struck. David began modifying the transmission protocol, stripping out redundant data and compressing the essential information. Instead of sending everything, he focused on the most important revelations: the location of hidden human colonies, the truth about precursor origins, and the access codes to activate dormant facilities throughout the galaxy. "What are you doing?" Lynn asked as Federation reinforcements appeared on their sensors. "Changing the plan," David said, his fingers flying over the ancient controls. "We can't send everything, but we can send enough to wake people up." He triggered the transmission at 82% completion. The quantum crystals blazed with light as information flowed through the entanglement network, reaching every human world simultaneously. The data packets were small but devastating. Proof that humans were the inheritors of the galaxy's greatest civilization, suppressed by alien governments built on lies and stolen technology. The effect was immediate and dramatic. All across human space, dormant precursor facilities began activating in response to the transmitted codes. Ancient shipyards came online, revealing fleets of vessels far more advanced than anything the Federation possessed. Hidden colonies that had been cut off for millennia suddenly reconnected with the galactic community. On Earth itself, the transmission awakened installations buried beneath major cities. The energy signatures were impossible to hide, and within hours every government on the planet knew that their species' true history had been revealed. The Federation's response was predictable, but futile. They tried to jam the quantum network, but the precursor technology was beyond their ability to interfere with. They attempted to destroy the newly activated facilities, but found themselves outgunned by weapon systems they couldn't understand. Within days, the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted completely. Human colonies that had been under Federation oversight suddenly found themselves in possession of technology that made their former masters obsolete. Ships appeared that could cross the galaxy in hours instead of months. Weapons activated that could shatter planets or move stars. But the most important change wasn't technological. It was psychological. Humans throughout the galaxy realized they weren't the primitive newcomers the Federation had claimed. They were the children of the species that had built the greatest civilization in galactic history. David and Lynn watched the transformation unfold from the bridge of a precursor vessel that had awakened in response to their transmission. The ship was beautiful beyond description, its hull flowing with the same symbols David had first seen on his simple artifact. "Look at that," Lynn said, pointing at the display showing human worlds throughout the galaxy. "They're all connecting to each other, sharing information and resources. It's like watching a sleeping giant wake up." David nodded, still amazed by what they'd accomplished. A simple repair job had uncovered the truth about human origins and triggered a revolution that would reshape galactic civilization. But he wasn't interested in conquest or revenge against the Federation races who had suppressed them. "The precursors left us more than just technology," he said, studying the philosophical texts in the ship's database. "They left us wisdom about how to use power responsibly. The new human civilization that emerged was nothing like the old Federation. Instead of domination and control, it was built on cooperation and shared knowledge. The alien races who had once ruled the galaxy were invited to join as equal partners, not subjects. Some, like the Alterians, embraced the change and contributed their own knowledge to the growing alliance. Others, like the Drakmarians, resisted and retreated to their isolated worlds. But even they couldn't deny that the galaxy had entered a new age. David Ross, the simple engineer who had started it all with a broken ship and a determination to fix things himself, became something he'd never expected, a bridge between the old galaxy and the new. He traveled from world to world, helping humans and aliens alike understand the precursor technology that was reshaping their civilization. Standing on the observation deck of a massive precursor station orbiting Earth, David looked out at the fleet of ships preparing to explore the galaxy's furthest reaches. Humans were finally ready to reclaim their birthright as the children of the stars, not as conquerors but as gardeners, nurturing the galaxy back to the heights of civilization their ancestors had achieved. The simple repair that had started everything was complete. But the real work, building a better galaxy for all its inhabitants, was just beginning.